Hello students, in previous part we have studied about CNS brain portion, and in this part we will discuss on the other part of CNS spinal cord. As we have discussed CNS central nervous system, it consists two parts, brain and spinal cord. We have already discussed about brain. In this section, we will study about spinal cord. Spinal cord is a long cylindrical structure. Its length is different in adult male and female. Length in male is 45 centimeter, but in female it is slightly shorter. Length in female it is slightly shorter, we can say 43 centimeter. So an average we can calculate that the length of a spinal cord is 42 to 45 centimeter. It is a cylindrical in structure. Although in the female the spinal cord is slightly shorter, but nearly the weight of spinal cord is equal in male and female, that is nearly 35 gram. The weight of spinal cord in male and female is 35 gram. Spinal cord just run parallel to the vertebral column. Such like as vertebral column, the spinal cord cover this vertebral column, this one like. It means the spinal cord is present outside. Spinal cord runs parallel to the vertebral column. Vertebral column. Spinal cord is also protected with three layers, those three layers which protect the brain, such like as called meninges, dura mater, arachnoid and pia mater. Those all three membranes or layers also cover the spinal cords, except then one other, especially the epidermal layer also covered with the spinal cord. Such like as we can say that there are three membranes which cover the brain called meninges. Those three membranes also cover the spinal cord. The innermost is known as pia mater, and outermost middle is the middle layer called arachnoid. This is the arachnoid, and the outer layer is called dura mater. This is the dura mater. These are the three meninges which protect the spinal cord. Except that the vertebra bone also cover the spinal cord, because vertebra is protected in the spinal cord, but the vertebral bones are present outside, and those vertebral bones cover also the spinal cords, and this makes another protective layer called epidermal layer. There is two cavity present between the three membranes, such like as subdural cavity, subarachnoid cavity. But here is another cavity present in which special tissue adipose is present. This is the cavity which contains adipose tissue. Adipose tissue which is made up of fat. So one extra layer cover the spinal cords which protect the spinal cord from external. If we cut the spinal cord transversely, we can see that there are different sections. Firstly, we can say that it is a cylindrical structure, but there is no definite diameter of spinal cord. This is because there are two types, two regions where the swelling can be seen. This is the long cylindrical structure of spinal cord. It arises from the base of the brain, which is called foramen magnum, and start from the upper side of vertebral column, the first bone that is called atlas. It starts from the atlas and extend downward lower side. But we can see that the diameter of spinal cord is not definite. This is because at the upper side, it means this is the zone of cervical. Here is some swelling can be seen, and lower side lumbar also can see swelling. Due to this swelling, we can say that there is no definite diameter of the spinal cord. This swelling is called cervical swelling. And this one present in lumbar swelling. The spinal cord arises from the cervical, first cervical to lumbar cervical, first lumbar. Spinal cord just arises from the cervical one bone to lumbar one. After that, it becomes a conical part. It means it is joined and form a conical part. This is called conus medullaris. And after that, the spinal cords may arise in a fibers, and there are some nerves arises from here. This one like structures. These nerves arises from the first lumbar to the last one coccyx. There are 31 segments of spinal nerves arises from the spinal cord. So we can say that 31 pair of spinal nerves arises from the spinal cord. Such like when 31 pairs of spinal nerves arises from spinal cord in different region which contain different segments. And these segments are in cervical. There are eight spinal nerves, 8 pair of spinal nerves are arises. These spinal nerves arises, and outside the spinal cord there are some bone of vertebra. This is the bone of vertebra. Just the spinal nerves arises between the joint of spinal vertebral bones. So in cervical there are 8 segments. In cervical 8, thoracic 12, and lumbar 5 in sacral and 1 in coccyx. So we can say that there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves arises from the spinal cords in different regions, and they have different segments. Cervical contains 8 pairs, thoracic 12 pairs, lumbar 5, sacral 5 and 1 coccyx. But we have seen that after lumbar 1, the nerve spinal cords may be arises into the spinal nerves. Note the after that lumbar, not in spinal cord. That the lower portion at the lumbar 1, it is known as conus medullaris. Clear? And this type of structure from lumbar first to coccyx, this is called cauda equina. Cauda equina. It means when the spinal nerves, spinal cord change into the nerves from after lumbar 1 to coccyx. This zone is called cauda equina. This is the structure of spinal cord. But when we transversely dissect the spinal cord, we can see that there are different regions which contain outer and inner matter. In spinal cord, outer matter is white because there are many myelinated neuron, and inner matter is called gray matter. How we can see that? If we transversely dissect the spinal nerves. If we transversely section of spinal cord, there are two grooves, or we can say two fissures can be seen. This one, like if we transversely dissect the spinal cord, we can see that there are two fissures, one towards the dorsal side and one is the ventral side. This is the ventral side, and this type of this fissure is called, this is the deeper ventral side that becomes the deeper grooves, but the dorsal side it forms a shallow grooves. We join this one next structure. If we transversely dissect the spinal cord, we can say there are two fissures. One towards the, this is the site of dorsal side. Dorsal side. And the grooves towards the dorsal side is shallow. This is shallow, so it is called dorsal fissure. Dorsal fissures. And the grooves towards the ventral side is deeper. This is called ventral fissure. Clear? The spinal cord just inside the two fissures are present in English alphabet H shape, or we can say that butterfly shape. Centrally, it contains centrally a central canal. This is called central canal. This is central canal, and just we have seen that, we have talked about the spinal cord in the fissures is present English alphabet H shaped or butterfly shaped structure. This one like structure. This is an H-shaped structure which form two types of horns, horn-like structure. A one toward the dorsal side and other one is one pair of ventral side. This is called ventral horn. Ventral horn. And this one is dorsal horn. The central canal is contained lineated or lined columnar cell which contain cilia, as well as it is filled with CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. This is the fluid which protect our brain as well as spinal cord from external shock. This structure is contained this one like columnar cell with the ciliated. This is filled with this one like structures. and filled with a fluid called CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. Outside the spinal cord contains outside material is myelinated neuron, so it is called white matter. And this inner zone is filled with non-myelinated. It contains non-myelinated neurons, so it provides the dark representation, or we can say that gray matter. Gray matter. In brain, external part contains gray matter and inner is white, but in spinal cord it is opposite. Outside white matter and inside is gray matter. So in this dissection there we can see that there are three cavities. Which one? The cavity which is present toward the dorsal, that is called dorsal cavity or dorsal funicle. Dorsal funicles. And the cavity which is present towards the ventral, that is called ventral funicles. And the cavity which is present lateral side, this is called lateral funicles. This is the structure of a spinal cord. Spinal cord provide us a mechanical strength with the vertebral column, as well as it helps to protect the spinal cord from external shocks, such like it contains CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. Clear? And in next we can study about reflex action. What is reflex action and reflex arc? Sometimes we can accidentally touch our hands, our legs and many and other parts with a pointed hot and cold. Our organs automatically withdraw from that part. This is due to the autonomously system, and this autonomously undesired sudden change in our surrounding area, in our environment, that is called a reflex action. It means whenever we touch a hot thing, a cold thing, a pointed end, or such like a scary animals, we withdraw our hands and other organs. This is due to the reflex action. The next is, what is reflex action? Reflex action. Sudden, involuntary change in our environment is called reflex action. Suppose we accidentally touch with hot, cold and pointed ends. We withdraw our organs just like us in a spontaneous, in a fraction of second. This is due to the reflex action. And reflex action is involuntary exchange. Involuntary action. We have studied that all the voluntary, all the desired functions are controlled by brain. But undesired or unwanted functions may be controlled by spinal cord, but the sensation power will be provided by the brains. For example, whenever we touch, we can explain the reflex action with the two examples. Suppose this is the thing which contain a hot material. And this is our hand. Whenever we accidentally touch it, we withdraw our hand. How this action can be completed? We have already studied there are two types of neuron on the basis of function: sensory neuron and motor neuron. Then the sensory neuron from affected to take the information to the spinal cord or CNS. It means to the CNS. This one like here, this one like middle part. This junction, sensory and motor, it is known as interneuron or relay neuron. This is called relay neuron or interneuron. The neuron which take information from effector to the CNS. This is called afferent fiber or sensory neuron, which transmit the signal from effector to the CNS via brain, because this is the spinal cord and this will contain the sensory organ, sensory system be controlled by the brain. So sensation provided to the brain. These signals are also transmitted to the brain, and from here, from CNS to effector organ, the information is transmitted. That is called efferent fiber. Efferent fiber, or we can say that motor neuron. So the action is completed within a few, or we can say that within a few seconds. But it can be completed by this type of system, sensory, motor and relay. Due to completed this one, we can say there are different ratio of afferent, efferent and interneuron and relay neuron. That is afferent, efferent and interneuron. The ratio of all these 1:1:1. It means one each of one neuron helped it to complete the reflex action. What is reflex action? The sudden environmental involuntary change, that is called reflex action. Whenever we touch these odd things, we withdraw our hand within a few seconds. This is completed by the sensory neuron, relay neuron and motor neuron. Clear? One more example we can see that while we sit on a bench on hanging our legs in the just not touch with the ground, and we gently hammered on the patella, it means we can jerk on the knee. Suppose we are sitting on a bench and this one is the patella. We gently hammered at this side. We can say that our legs moves forwardly. Our legs start to move forwardly. This one like. Why this is happened? This is called knee jerk. Sorry. This activity is knee jerk. This is due to the reflex action, because the patella, the sensory neuron from patella to in the thighs and connected to the spinal nerves, and from here this information sent to the sensory neuron to the spinal nerves and brain. After that we can feel there's some pain, and from sensory neuron, relay neuron transmit these signals to the effector organ, so we can slightly move our legs. When we hit air, our legs moves forwardly. This is due to the reflex action. Clear? And the next one is reflex arc. Reflex arc. What is the reflex arc? The pathway of reflex action. The pathway of reflex action. It means sensory neuron transmit the signals from effector to CNS, and from CNS to effector organ. This pathway makes a curve, makes an arc, and this is called reflex action. The pathway of reflex action, or the pathway of sensory neuron and motor neuron, that is called neuron is form an arc, because this pathway is happened due to the reflex action, and the arc which is formed due to the reflex action that is called reflex arc. What is reflex arc? The pathway of reflex action is called reflex arc. You can say that. And now the next definition of the pathway of sensory neuron and motor neuron which complete the reflex action, that forms an arc, and that arc is called reflex action. In next part we will study about PNS, the part of PNS as well as the other sensory organs.